The legend Mattia Binotto is back in F1. Carlos Sainz is still in search of a seat as pressure begins to build. And Sergio Perez is in a difficult position, as Liam Lawson could replace him. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Following the bombshell announcement of sweeping changes in the Audi Formula One project, the hiring of Mattia Binotto has been explained as a move to create independence for the team. As preparations continue for Audi's arrival on the Formula One grid in 2026, at which point the Sauber team will morph into Audi's F1 outfit, the German brand has announced the signing of former Ferrari team principal Mattia Binotto, who will take over from Andreas Seidl at the head of their F1 operations. With chairman Oliver Hoffmann also out the door, Audi has moved to explain these shock changes. They state that Binotto, coming in as chief operating and chief technical officer, ensures the autonomy and independence of the Audi F1 project, giving responsibility and accountability to Binotto. Audi CEO Gernot Döllner believes this move will free Audi's F1 team from their wider structure and allow for faster, authoritative decisions. Binotto will assume his new roles as of August 1. Our aim is to bring the entire Formula One project up to F1 speed by means of clear management structures, defined responsibilities, reduced interfaces, and efficient decision-making processes, said Döllner. For this purpose, the team must be able to act independently and quickly. Binotto last held a position in Formula One back in 2022, the Italian leaving Ferrari at the end of that year after holding the team principal role since 2019. He was succeeded by Fred Vasseur, who left Sauber to take on the Ferrari team principal position. Starting out with Ferrari in 1995 and going on to lead their engine division before ultimately rising to the team boss role, Binotto, Audi hope, will make a decisive contribution as he puts his extensive experience into their new Formula One project. I am delighted that we have been able to recruit Mattia Binotto for our ambitious Formula One project, said Döllner. With his extensive experience of more than 25 years in Formula One, he will undoubtedly be able to make a decisive contribution for Audi. One half of Audi's future F1 lineup is confirmed with Nico Hülkenberg to join from Haas for F1 2025, the final season under the Sauber name, leaving one seat remaining to be filled, which the likes of departing Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz have been heavily linked with. Carlos Sainz has still yet to decide upon his next move in Formula One, but admitted that Red Bull and Mercedes are still potential options for him in the future, even if a move to either team does not come to pass next season. Sainz is seen as the sport's most sought-after driver on the market, as his time with Ferrari comes to a close at the end of the season, with Lewis Hamilton arriving at Maranello in his place next season. The 29-year-old has been clear that he still has not decided upon where he will be going next in his career, with Williams having been open in making him their primary target to partner Alex Albon, alongside long-known interest from Audi and more recent reported courting from Alpine. While both seats at Red Bull are filled contractually beyond the end of the year, the future of Sergio Perez is under the spotlight and is believed to be uncertain as it stands, while Mercedes are looking to fill the seat vacated by Hamilton. When asked about the links with Williams and how he has driven for some of the most iconic teams on the grid already, Sainz is keen to not shut down links to a future drive with anyone just yet. Williams is, as you say, a super emblematic Formula One team, Sainz told the Spanish edition of GQ when asked about his future, and reminded they are one of the teams he has yet to drive for in his career.
Yes, it's one of the few that I have left. Red Bull Racing too, Mercedes too. There are 2 or 3 teams that I haven't been with yet, but maybe in the future I will go with them. I don't know when, because the future still seems to be quite uncertain. I don't even know, just to give you an idea.
What I do know is that I have been in 5 different teams in these 10 years, as I said before, and I have very good memories of every team I have been in, and I know that if tomorrow I have the opportunity to come back to any of these teams, I can come back, so I will keep it. Sainz has often been spoken about as one of the sport's most underrated drivers over the years, taking his first win at Silverstone in 2022, but he believes it is a label he has never felt among those in the know within the paddock. Honestly, I don't think so by the people who know the sport well, he responded when asked if he had ever felt undervalued in Formula One. I have never felt undervalued by team managers, drivers, or people who are very involved in the day-to-day running of the sport. Neither by the engineers nor by the people who follow the details. Perhaps by the media or by people who understand a little less or who follow the sport a little more superficially and who are not involved in the detail, it is possible that I have been paid less attention or underestimated at times. But as I always say, the people who matter to me are those who really understand the sport, and in that sense I have never felt undervalued by my rivals, by the engineers, and by the team managers. Red Bull senior advisor Helmut Marko called it rubbish to suggest Max Verstappen taking part in a sim race overnight before the Hungarian Grand Prix contributed to his frustration over team radio on Sunday. Verstappen engaged in a back and forth with engineer Gianpiero Lambiase throughout the race as he aired his frustrations, with the three-time world champion eventually finishing fifth on Sunday. Verstappen was taking part in a virtual 24 Hours of Spa event with his Team Redline outfit on Saturday night heading into Sunday morning, taking in a stint that took him past 3 a.m. local time before the Hungarian Grand Prix. While that led to questions about whether or not he should have taken part, such events are also nothing new to the Red Bull driver, having long enjoyed sim racing, and took in a night stint in a virtual Nürburgring 24 hours before winning the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix earlier this season. Marko pointed this out after the Hungarian Grand Prix, and while Verstappen himself said to any critics in no uncertain terms that they could fuck us off, the Red Bull Motorsport advisor explained he was as prepared as usual to race. He was up even longer in Imola, I don't know where the sleeping times came from again, and won the race, Marko said, as quoted by Autosport. Max has a different rhythm to me or other people, and the time he went to bed is nothing out of the ordinary for him. He didn't even wake up at 10 o'clock in Zandvoort when the helicopters flew over his motorhome. He's got his sleep quota. He's had it as usual. That's rubbish. As for his own messages, Verstappen explained that they were a result of simply feeling annoyed with how his afternoon transpired at the Hungaroring, going 3 consecutive races without victory for the first time since 2021. I was just annoyed with today, he said. Maybe the team at the time didn't realize what they did wrong, or they maybe didn't see it was so severe. But in the car, you have also different feelings. I already said yesterday that maybe some people are not on the same wavelength with it's as severe as it is. I knew it was already going to be a difficult race and beating McLaren would be tough. But then you need at least to get a P3 over the line, and even that we couldn't do. Admitting he was conflicted on Lando Norris yielding to Oscar Piastri in Hungary, Martin Brundle felt Norris waited far too long and cost himself the chance to fight back. Looking to cover the pacey Lewis Hamilton behind, McLaren, with their drivers Piastri and Norris running P1 and P2 respectively, brought Norris in for his second and final stop before Piastri, resulting in Norris getting the undercut on his teammate and taking the lead of the race. From there, things got tricky. McLaren instructed Norris to allow Piastri back through into the lead, but Norris initially was not playing ball, instead extending the gap. But with 3 laps to go, Norris conceded the lead and ultimately the win to Piastri. Brundle feels Norris's approach was a mistake, arguing Norris should have yielded early and then gone on the attack for the win. In his Sky Sports column, Brundle wrote, "Comfortably in the lead, Norris became reluctant to make this swap. He ignored radio calls to slow his pace to protect the tires and to let Piastri through. Then he began to argue that he was fighting for a championship against Max Verstappen and so needed the extra points, already being 47 points ahead of Piastri on race morning. Lando then suggested if Oscar could catch up, he'd let him through. The team radio calls became ever firmer and more impassioned, but stopped short of team principal Andrea Stella having to intervene with a direct instruction. One of the core clauses in any F1 contract is that you will follow team instructions at all times, and this is a long-standing problem given that in F1 you are employed and drive as a team, but you race, score points, and are measured as an individual. Like Lando, I'm conflicted here. I managed a driver, at McLaren funnily enough, who was absolutely duped into handing over a race victory. Not that this was the case on Sunday. I've also seen multiple champions who would have won the race and then handled the nuclear fallout afterwards, and who would have been secretly admired for that killer instinct in many quarters. The compliant team player on one of Lando's shoulders won out over the selfish, competitive demon on his other. But McLaren has risen to be the team to beat on the grid these past few races because they've had a very strong team ethic and a calm, professional, and methodical approach under the increasingly impressive Stella. They have frequently swapped the 2 drivers around in the past couple of seasons, and as they said to Lando on the radio, You'll need all of us if you want to be champion. I wonder what Oscar would have done if the roles had been reversed. His manager, Mark Webber, was on the receiving end of the infamous Red Bull Multi-21 team orders in Malaysia 2013 when Sebastian Vettel ignored pre-race agreements and in-race instructions. What Lando should have done is let Oscar through immediately when requested, and then given himself the maximum opportunity to overtake if he could, to take victory that way. Norris was able to trim Verstappen's Drivers' Championship lead to 76 points with that Hungary runner-up result. Anthony Davidson has described Liam Lawson as phenomenal and suggested the New Zealander was still the favorite to take Sergio Perez's Red Bull seat. Perez continues to be under threat after a lackluster first half of the 2024 season, and with Lawson watching on from the background, former Toyota driver Davidson believes Lawson represents a good replacement. Lawson is again on reserve duty this season, but it was around this time last year when he was thrust into the limelight due to Daniel Ricciardo's injury at Zandvoort. With the Australian fully fit this time round, Lawson's most realistic mid-season opportunity is at Red Bull with Perez under an enormous amount of pressure. Red Bull are said to be waiting until the summer break to make a decision, but Davidson believes in Lawson, the team have a strong replacement. He was impressive, of course he was, Davidson said on Sky F1. And I think that's why we're all still talking about him and almost expecting him to be the one to fill Sergio Perez's seat if he were to leave or be pushed out of the team. He was feisty. He was thrown into the deep end and he swam very well and not just took the fight to Yuki Tsunoda, he beat him pretty much. And he knocked out Max Verstappen in Singapore qualifying. He was phenomenal, and it wasn't just one race, he did it multiple times. So he caused a stir and we're excited to see him back in Formula One as a fully fledged race driver. VCarB boss Peter Beyer, though, has said, "Thank God it's not my decision," declaring Perez's future was up to Helmut and Christian. Personally speaking, it's like everything in life. Every huge challenge is a huge opportunity. In this sport, that's just the way it is, Beyer told motorsporttotal.com. Liam proved last year that he can handle the pressure under the most adverse circumstances. I spoke to him because he drove the Red Bull last week. He said that the car was really cool to drive because it was incredibly forgiving compared to our car. It is less prone to errors. At the same time, it drives incredibly sharply when you get to the front. It is a car that you have to master. McLaren boss Andrea Stella said the team would make good use of Nico Rosberg's recommendation to be more strict when it comes to communicating team orders. Lando Norris was told to give the place back to Oscar Piastri at your convenience, but Rosberg, who himself was involved in a number of team order calls during his time at Mercedes, said that gives a driver far too much wiggle room. McLaren were becoming more and more desperate as the final laps ticked down, with Norris appearing to ignore any request to hand the lead back to teammate Piastri. Rosberg believes that situation was made worse by the wording of the messages Norris received from his race engineer Will Joseph, and the former Mercedes driver told team boss Stella that after the race. "I will allow myself to make a statement first before a question," he said on Sky F1. "I strongly recommend that you guys, in managing this intra-team battle between the two drivers, you need to be extremely clear and firm. Today there was the word, your convenience Lando. That for a driver leaves the door very wide open to use all the kinds of gray areas, so that would be my strong recommendation going forward. Very clear, strong instructions from the pit wall to the drivers, otherwise you end up with a whole bunch of difficulties between the drivers, and I talk from experience." Stella, to his credit, took the recommendation well and suggested they will make good use of it. The Italian was also questioned about the radio messages sent to Norris, but he maintained he was confident the Briton would give the place back. "I think there was a little bit more than that single comment and message from Will," he said. "There's an entire approach to racing that we have with our team and drivers. We are on this trajectory together. None of us, the team, Lando, Oscar, can go alone. That's the message that we discussed on Sunday morning and with the drivers. You need to refresh this message. That's why we have this meeting every Sunday, and we are extremely pleased by our drivers. They are supporting the trajectory of McLaren, which is incredible. And for me, that's the news today. We can talk a little bit more about Lando and Oscar, but the message is that it's a P1 and P2 in qualifying and P1 and P2 in the race, and that's incredible." Stella drilled down on Norris's actions, and rather than criticize him for making the team sweat, He instead said he would be more worried if he had given up the spot easily. I don't know any race driver that when he's leading a race will be happy to say, "Oh yeah, of course, why we don't swap back their position to the previous order," Stella suggested. That's not the nature of the drivers, and I will be extremely worried. You will see me very concerned if Lando would say that. So I think that's why we needed to recall our principles. That's why we recall the principles on Sunday morning. And I think it's true that the driver, if we want to be competitive in the championship for Lando in particular, that is in the strongest position he will need. He will need the support of the team. Daniel Ricciardo has served his purpose at VCarb as speculation continues to swirl over his future within Red Bull. That is the opinion of Sky F1 pundit Anthony Davidson, who suspects Ricciardo is on shaky ground as Red Bull prepare to determine over the summer break how their driver lineups will look going forward. Red Bull senior advisor Helmut Marko recently confirmed that there is a desire among the shareholders for VCarb to return to its roots as Red Bull's junior team, developing future talent, with Davidson theorizing that Ricciardo no longer fits that vision. Davidson argued that Ricciardo did have a key role to play, mentoring teammate Yuki Tsunoda and the team overall, but with Tsunoda now far more experienced than when Ricciardo got the call midway through 2023, while Tsunoda leads the F1 2024 qualifying and race head-to-heads against Ricciardo, he suspects the writing could be on the wall for Ricciardo. I think the comments from Helmut are genuine as well, said Davidson in reference to the VCarb junior team focus. That is the purpose of RB, the junior team to Red Bull, to be nurturing young talent, and I think Daniel actually had a very good position in the team when Yuki was young, but he's not an inexperienced driver anymore. And Daniel was there to help Yuki and the team, I feel, to help guide them and increase performance in the team. But now that the performance isn't really there for him, I think he's on a bit of shaky ground, and it's true that the team's purpose is to bring on younger talent. Ricciardo had been seen as the prime candidate to replace Sergio Perez at Red Bull down the line, but Perez was signed to a new multi-year deal in June, with Ricciardo struggling to impress. Perez, though, like Ricciardo, is facing renewed pressure to retain his Red Bull place amid a wretched run of form, with Red Bull reserve Liam Lawson, who replaced the injured Ricciardo and impressed in a 5-race spell last year, emerging as the leading contender to replace Perez if that call is made. Ricciardo, speaking to media at the Hungarian GP, said Red Bull are expecting more of Perez, but he and his fellow veteran have learnt in time to block out external noise about their future. I guess it depends how we're spotlighted in the media, but the truth is every driver is under pressure, said Ricciardo. Even the ones that are killing it, there has been pressure for them to keep performing. So my point is that we all feel it. Obviously, I've been in the spotlight a bit this year. Checo's in the spotlight now. Even after my good race in Montreal, I said, look, I need to do another good one because you're only as good as your last race, and one good weekend doesn't quite let you off the hook. It temporarily does, but then it can quickly change. Yes, of course, I know. I've seen some statistics that Max Verstappen has scored a lot more points than Checo, and of course, yes, they are expecting a bit more. But this is the sport. It's what we're in. We feel it all the time. It's just who is in the spotlight this week. It's up to us to obviously try to shut it out. And it's not easy as well sometimes. If everyone is just always asking you questions about your future, you have this, you have that, it sometimes feels very negative or can sometimes feel heavy. But I think in my experience, and I include Checo here as well because he's also been in Formula One a similar amount of time, we have dealt with it enough that I think you learn just to realize to focus on the engineering, focus on the car setup and the rest. You hear it, but you have to just roll with it. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.